The sound of porcelain meeting glass echoed like a verdict. Ethan Vance set his coffee cup on the table deliberately, precisely, and said the words that cleaved through 17 years of loyalty. Your position has been terminated. We're moving in a new direction. Fiona, for a moment. I thought I'd misheard him. The hum of the city from 28 floors below filled the silence his voice left behind. Through the glass wall, sunlight cut hard across the polished table, making the room look cleaner than it felt. 2 HR representatives sat opposite me, eyes lowered, faces arranged in that polite stillness companies use when they're about to erase someone. No one moved, no one looked at me. Ethan leaned back in the chair once reserved for his father, legs crossed, voice smooth as if he were reading a line he'd practiced in the mirror. You've done remarkable work. No one's questioning that, but the company needs fresh energy, new leadership, new ideas. Fresh energy? That was what they called replacing experience with youth. If this moment has struck a chord, that kind of silent injustice, don't scroll past. Hit like and subscribe. I'm guessing 96% of the people watching right now haven't, because what happened next was something no one in that glass room saw coming. The sting hit slow, almost graceful. I felt my throat tighten, not with tears, but with disbelief so sharp it numbed the edges of everything. The same conference room where I'd received the company's Innovation Award now felt like a stage set for a public burial. Behind Ethan, my presentation screen still glowed faintly, lines of code looping through the simulation I'd finished hours before. Ghost Core 3.1 pulsed like a heartbeat in the background, its data windows open. Alive. Waiting. I should have closed it. Instead, I stared at the numbers as if they could answer the question no one in the room dared ask. How do you erase the person who built the very system running behind you? Ethan cleared his throat. You'll receive your exit packet by email before the end of the day. HR will handle logistics. His words landed with mechanical precision. My name, my years, my work all reduced to logistics. I felt the heat rise to my face but kept my voice level. I understand. He smiled, mistaking composure for surrender. While he spoke, my peripheral vision caught a flicker on the monitor. A single line of code shifted from green to amber. Transfer admin rights initiated. Validation timer 168 hours. The system had heard him too. When I finally stood, the room stayed silent except for the faint click of my heels and the echo of that coffee cup still ringing, like the sound of dignity being set down and left behind. By the time I reached my office, the light had changed. The noon glare that once poured through the windows had turned a dull amber, washing everything in that tired glow that only comes after endings. The air felt too still, too clean, like someone had already started erasing me before I even arrived. My nameplate was gone, just a faint rectangle on the glass wall where it used to be. Fiona Turner, Senior Systems Director, stripped away so neatly that not even the adhesive remained. I stood there for a moment, half expecting someone to walk in, to tell me it was a mistake. No one did. Only the hum of the building's ventilation filled the silence. That sterile kind of hum that pretends to be alive. The first thing I saw was the photo, a framed snapshot of my old engineering team, 8 people in faded polos, standing beside the first prototype of the Vance server unit. Someone had scrawled across the bottom in black marker, built by hands, not by heirs. When I reached for it, the frame slipped, hit the desk, and cracked. The sound was soft, almost apologetic. I crouched to pick it up, and for a second my reflection split in the broken glass, half of me still there, half already fading. 17 years of work sat in boxes, waiting to be folded down into silence. Manuals, technical drawings, the mug with number 1 architect printed crookedly by an intern 10 Christmases ago. Everything I had once called mine now looked borrowed, temporary. I sat in my chair one last time. The leather creaked like it recognized me. On the screen, the system I'd built still glowed quietly, Ghost Core 3.1, the same code that had pulsed behind Ethan's smug smile hours earlier. My inbox was already half empty. I had started disabling access faster than I could open messages. Then, one line blinked into existence at the top of the screen. Subject data replication complete. No sender name, no greeting, just those 3 words. For a moment, I didn't breathe. They had cloned it. The entire system. The culmination of years of testing, encryptions, sleepless nights. They'd copied it before my access expired. But they didn't realize what they'd taken. The Ghost Core wasn't the real system, it was the decoy. A prototype wrapped in the same code shell but missing the authentic sequence. To anyone else, it looked perfect, functional, in 7 days. It would delete itself entirely. I watched the cursor blink beside that message like a heartbeat. Data replication complete. A perfect theft of nothing. I shut down the monitor and looked around. My office felt smaller now, boxed in by the weight of everything unsaid. I started to pack, slowly, each motion deliberate. Quiet, not the frantic kind of packing when someone's angry, but the mechanical sort that comes when emotion burns out completely. My hands moved on their own, while my mind floated somewhere above. A single envelope sat in my top drawer, the thank you note from the board when I'd saved the company from a security breach 4 years ago. In gratitude for your dedication. The ink had faded. The gratitude had too. The sound of tape tearing broke the air as I sealed the first box. It was final. Heavy. Then my phone buzzed. One missed call. Mom. A voicemail followed. I pressed play. Her voice. Soft and steady, as always, honey. Don't let them take your joy. The words hit harder than Ethan's entire speech. I closed my eyes, pressing the phone to my chest. My mother didn't understand the technology, the patents, the politics, but she understood what was being taken. Dignity, belonging, the quiet kind of joy that comes from being needed. When I opened my eyes again, the office lights had dimmed automatically for energy saving, as if even the building had decided I wasn't worth the power anymore. I looked at the cracked photo, the empty wall, the black screen. Then I took a breath that trembled halfway out. They thought they'd taken everything. What they'd really done was start the countdown. The cafe had always been my refuge. The one place near the office where no one asked for updates, deadlines, or solutions. But that afternoon, even the comfort of its dim lighting couldn't steady me. The air smelled of burnt espresso and rain-soaked concrete. Every sound, the hiss of the milk frother. The clinking of cups felt too sharp, like the world had been turned up one unbearable notch. I chose the corner booth, same as always, where I could see the window reflection of the Vance Dynamics Tower just 2 blocks away. Its glass facade caught the sunset like it was on fire. I stared at it until the colors bled together. Somewhere inside that building, my name was being erased from directories, email servers, and project archives. The process was mechanical, but it felt personal. The barista set my coffee down gently, as if he sensed something had broken in me. I opened my notebook, the one I kept for thoughts I didn't trust to the cloud, and wrote the only sentence that came to mind: 17 years, deleted in a paragraph. The pen stopped. My hand trembled, not from sadness but from something colder rage, tightly contained beneath a practiced stillness. I wasn't angry that they'd fired me. I was angry at the ease with which they'd done it. The same people who once applauded me for redefining innovation had signed the termination papers without hesitation. I sipped my coffee. It was already cold. The bitterness suited the moment. On my laptop, the company login screen glared back with the red warning, "Access revoked." I scrolled through my personal inbox, hovering over the last email thread from Ethan's team. My cursor paused on the one titled System Transfer Authorization. I'd written it myself months ago. Back when the board had asked for full ownership documentation, I had followed their request. I just never told them that the original license rested elsewhere. I exhaled, long and measured, and selected all the old messages. My finger hovered over delete. That's when my phone buzzed. A notification flashed across the screen, an encrypted alert from a name most people would overlook: Auralis LLC. My heart kicked. That was my company. The shell I had quietly incorporated 3 years ago when I realized Vance Dynamics' legal team was rewriting intellectual property clauses. Oralis wasn't just a name, it was a firewall made of foresight. I unlocked the message. It wasn't an email. Not really, more like a system ping. A string of code pulsed on my screen. Faint blue against black patent key transfer secured under Oralis systems. For a second, I couldn't breathe. It had activated automatically. The moment they'd revoked my credentials at Vance Dynamics. The patent license had reverted to Oralis. Legally. The system they'd just stolen, Ghost Core, now belonged entirely to me. My pulse steadied. Not relief. Not triumph. Just the cold awareness that I'd built my own safety net long before the fall. Outside. A drizzle began, tapping the glass like static. I glanced up from my screen and caught sight of the Vance Tower again. The mirrored surface reflected the overcast sky and the blurred lights of passing traffic. For a moment, it looked like the whole building was dissolving into water. I imagined Ethan sitting in my chair, issuing orders he didn't understand, assuming power he hadn't earned. He'd think he'd won. He'd think I'd walked away defeated. I closed my notebook, slid it beside the coffee cup, and looked down at the phrase I'd written earlier, 17 years. Deleted in a paragraph. Then, underneath it, I added another line, 7 days. That's all it will take. The pen's ink bled slightly into the paper, just enough to blur the edges, like the reflection outside the window. I finished the last sip of coffee. It was cold, metallic, unwelcoming, like the company I'd just left behind. But as I stood to leave, I caught my reflection overlapping with the building's image in the glass. 2 versions of me, one fading, one standing tall, for the first time all day. I smiled. The countdown had already begun. Night fell without ceremony. The city outside my apartment window pulsed with its usual rhythm, neon lights, distant sirens, the faint hum of a world that didn't care who had been fired that morning. Inside, everything was still. Too still. I sat at my kitchen table, the glow from my laptop casting a cold, blue light across the room. It painted my reflection on the window like a ghost, tired eyes, messy hair, and a face that had forgotten how to look surprised. The mug beside me was untouched. Steam had long stopped rising. For hours, I just sat there, scrolling through memories disguised as files, old drafts, archived notes, reports from systems I no longer had access to. The word terminated had appeared so many times that day, it no longer looked like English. Finally, I opened the local copy of the core program Ghost Core 3.1, my creation, my curse, my masterpiece. It loaded slowly, as if it too were waking from shock. The familiar lines of code began to scroll across the screen, cascading like falling rain. Then, there it was, the small security header I hadn't looked at in months. Validation required 7 days remaining. The text pulsed once, then steadied. A countdown timer had started. I froze. The system's internal security feature, the Ghost Protocol, had activated automatically. It wasn't supposed to, unless someone revoked the original creator's credentials. My termination that morning had triggered it without me touching a thing. I typed a few quick commands, fingers stiff, the movements mechanical from muscle memory. The logs opened. I scrolled down, watching timestamps blur together until one line stopped me cold. Auto-trigger on termination the exact moment Ethan Vance said, "You're done here." I leaned back, heart thudding against my ribs. The irony was almost poetic. Ethan had pulled the trigger himself. He just didn't know it yet, for years. I'd built Ghost Core to be foolproof, every copy tethered to the creator's biometric key. Every access requiring validation. Without it, the system would degrade in 7 days and erase itself, completely secure by design, unstoppable by arrogance. I'd created it to protect against theft. Now it would protect me. The silence in the apartment was heavy, broken only by the faint buzz of the city beyond the glass. I reached for my calendar app, still synced to the company's server. The schedule for the coming weeks blinked in front of me: board meeting, system launch, investor review, patent review hearing. All the things I was supposed to attend, all now irrelevant. I selected every appointment and pressed delete. Each confirmation ping felt like a nail sealing a coffin. Then my eyes caught the only reminder left on the list: renew medical insurance, April 10th. I hovered over it, thumb trembling slightly on the trackpad. The policy had been tied to my employment. It was useless now, expired the moment they handed me that manila folder. I left it there anyway, maybe as a quiet reminder of what corporate loyalty really bought. The screen dimmed, casting half my face into shadow. My reflection merged with the city lights beyond, a ghost staring back. I opened a notepad window beside the code and typed a single line for myself: 7 days. Watch and wait. The blue light flickered as if the system understood. The ghost core didn't need me to act. It was already counting down, line by line, heartbeat by heartbeat. I closed my eyes for a moment, listening to the faint hum of my old world crumbling a few miles away. They'd think I was gone, silent, defeated. But silence can be a weapon when you've built the detonator yourself. When I finally shut the laptop, the glow faded, leaving only darkness and the faint reflection of a woman who looked nothing like the one who'd walked out of that glass office. Morning came like an insult, bright, loud, and indifferent. The sunlight pushed through the half-closed blinds of my apartment, landing across the same laptop that had watched me unravel the night before. I hadn't slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the code still running behind Ethan's voice. The echo of "you're done here" replaying like a glitch that refused to clear. I opened the browser out of habit. The homepage loaded instantly, and there it was, the headline that turned my stomach: "The future is here. Vance Dynamics ushers in a new era of innovation." Below the banner sat a photo of Ethan, flawless in a navy suit, his hand resting on the metallic curve of a model I had designed 3 years ago, the Ghost Core housing prototype. He was smiling that practiced executive smile, the kind that suggested confidence without comprehension. The caption beneath read Ethan Vance, Vice President of Product Strategy, leading the next generation of AI development, and below that, a quote from his father, the CEO himself. She was good but not scalable. I read it twice, not because I didn't understand, but because part of me couldn't believe he'd said it out loud. Not scalable. That was how they defined a person now: not adaptable, not efficient enough for mass production. The coffee in my cup had gone cold, but I took a sip anyway. Bitterness suited me better than warmth today. I clicked on the image to enlarge it. A reflex I didn't question until I noticed something strange. In the metadata bar along the side, the photographer's name appeared automatically: Clara Jennings, my former assistant. Clara, who had shadowed me through endless nights of testing, who'd once cried in my office after being overlooked for a raise. I had been the one to write her recommendation letter. A laugh escaped me, dry, humorless, the kind that leaves a burn in your throat. Betrayal rarely came from strangers. It came from the ones who'd borrowed your courage to build their own. I closed the browser tab and leaned back in my chair, letting the cheap vinyl creak beneath me. The room was too bright, the city too alive for what I felt. The quiet calm that followed wasn't peace. It was the stillness of exhaustion, the kind you reach after realizing that outrage costs more energy than you have left to give. My phone buzzed beside me. I ignored it at first, assuming it was another automated notice from HR. But then I saw the name billing update, St. Matthew's Hospital. My chest tightened. I opened the message. Your insurance provider has declined coverage as of April 4th. Outstanding balance, $12,460. The screen blurred as my breath caught halfway. The date, April 4th, was yesterday. The same day they'd fired me. I scrolled down. The next line made my hands go cold. Patient Lillian Turner. Service ongoing cardiac rehabilitation. My mother. The hospital bill had doubled overnight, without my company plan. She was suddenly uninsured. in the space of 24 hours. They hadn't just stripped my title, they'd pulled the safety net out from under the only person I cared for. I lowered the phone slowly, staring at the glow of the laptop still showing Ethan's polished grin. For the first time in 17 years, the image of that company didn't make me feel pride. It made me feel nothing. Just a quiet, expanding void where loyalty used to live. I took another sip of the cold coffee, forcing it down. The bitterness settled like armor. I clicked the tab one last time, saving the image of Ethan's press release, and filed it in a private folder labeled Legacy. The irony wasn't lost on me. They thought the future was theirs to announce. They didn't realize the system celebrating behind them was already dying, counting down, line by line. I closed the lid of my laptop, the reflection of my own face disappearing with the screen's light. The city outside roared with traffic, ambition, and noise. Inside, I let silence win. By the third morning, the city had already forgotten me, but the system hadn't. I woke before sunrise, instinctively reaching for the phone that no longer buzzed with company updates. Old habits die slower than pride. The apartment was quiet except for the low murmur of the radio, something I'd left on overnight. A poor substitute for another human voice. Sources say the new defense framework developed by Vance Dynamics is expected to revolutionize international security contracts. The announcer droned, his tone polished and distant. Then, almost as an afterthought, he added, "Insiders credit an anonymous woman engineer for the foundation of the original prototype." I froze. Anonymous. They were talking about me. The name had been stripped, but the details were unmistakable: the time frame, the code structure, the model's efficiency rating, a story reduced to a ghost, just like its creator. I let the words fade into static as the anchor moved on to stock reports. When I turned to the window, dawn was crawling over the skyline. From where I stood, I could see the Vance Tower glinting faintly, its mirrored glass already catching the light. Somewhere behind those windows, my system, the Ghost Core, was breathing without me. Or at least, trying to. At 9:15 a.m., I opened my laptop. The screen glowed to life, displaying a familiar web of encrypted dashboards. My private terminal still had external monitoring access, not to interfere, just to watch. The pulse graphs looked slower than yesterday. Then, a notification appeared in the corner of the screen: incoming secure message, unknown sender. I clicked it. The core is rejecting admin access. Are you behind this? No signature? Just those 10 words, blinking against a black background. The phrasing was technical, but the tone carried something else: fear. I recognized the writing style immediately. Reed Matthews, senior engineer. He'd been on my team for 5 years, always precise, never reckless. For him to contact me now meant panic had already started to spread inside. I didn't respond. There was no need. Instead, I turned my head toward the wall calendar still hanging beside my desk. The square marked April 10th glared back the reminder I hadn't deleted Renew Medical Insurance. My eyes drifted up one line, tracing the days. Today was April 6th. 4 days left. The system would hold until then, and then it would collapse. Exactly as designed, on screen. Reed's message flickered once, then vanished. Gone. No trace. No archive. No retrieval. I smiled faintly. That security feature, the 60-second auto-delete, was my own creation. I'd built it last year to protect field engineers from legal retaliation during test runs. Ironically, it now protected me, somewhere downtown. A dozen people were likely scrambling around a conference table, searching for the root of the minor delay. They'd run diagnostics, check power grids, blame outdated firmware, anything except the truth, because the truth required admitting they didn't understand what they'd inherited. The irony tasted sweet, not triumphant, just quietly satisfying, like a secret finally remembering who it belonged to. I minimized the monitoring window and let the soft hum of the radio fill the apartment again. The anchor had moved on to politics now, but I only caught fragments: budget cuts, defense reform, system integration, all words that used to belong to my world. For a brief moment, I considered calling Reed, telling him it wasn't his fault, that the system was never theirs to fix, but I didn't. The silence was necessary. Let them feel the discomfort of not knowing. It was the only language the powerful ever learned from. I leaned back, letting the chair creak beneath me, and folded my arms. The sunlight reached across the desk, cutting through dust motes that shimmered like suspended code fragments. My laptop screen dimmed automatically, and my own reflection stared back, calm, composed, untouchable. 4 days. That was all it would take for every false narrative, every smug press release, every stolen credit line to fold into silence. My phone buzzed once more, this time with a message from a news app, Ethan Vance, to host live investor briefing Friday morning. Friday, the 7th day. I turned off the radio, the silence swallowing everything in one clean breath. Then I whispered the words I'd repeated. Since the moment I left that glass office, let them run it! The screen faded to black, reflecting nothing but calm control and the faint, satisfied curve of a smile that had waited far too long. The morning of the 4th day arrived with the kind of silence that usually comes before a storm. The air was heavy, the city unusually still. I made coffee without tasting it, letting the rhythmic drip fill the apartment. The bitterness didn't matter anymore. Every hour had become a calculation, now a countdown disguised as routine. Across town, the Vance Dynamics building was lit before dawn. I knew because the internal live feed told me so. From my laptop, I could see everything, the boardroom lights flickering on, the digital screens coming to life, the same sterile stage where I used to stand, the same space Ethan would now use to declare victory. The headline on their internal network flashed across the stream: Live Investor Briefing Project Ghost Core Launch Update. I didn't need to watch it, but I did. Curiosity was its own quiet punishment. On the screen, Ethan stood beneath the company logo, speaking with that confident cadence he'd borrowed from his father. We're proud to say the system is fully operational, stable, secure, and ready for global deployment. He used my words, my cadence, my slides. Even the model on the table beside him was one I had built by hand during the first prototype phase. The only difference now was the absence of truth. I opened a terminal window on my laptop. My private backdoor connection was still intact. The system's live diagnostics appeared within second streams of data cascading in perfect rhythm. But at the bottom of the feed, one line blinked: red integrity check, 72 hours remaining. The counter was shrinking right on schedule. I exhaled slowly, my pulse steady, every breath measured. Anticipation wasn't excitement, it was precision under restraint. I started scanning the directory logs, partly out of habit, partly to confirm what I already knew: they had no idea what they were standing on. Halfway through the scan, I froze. A new file had been created just hours earlier. I clicked on it. The extension wasn't right. XL instead of XE, a meaningless typo. Unless you knew how Vance's automated backup servers worked, files ending in XL were treated as export logs, not executables, which meant they couldn't back it up. I hadn't realized I'd made that change months ago. In a half-sleeping haze of code and caffeine, what had been an accident then was a weapon now, an invisible lock hidden in plain sight. I leaned back and allowed myself the smallest smile. They could present, brag, promise billions it wouldn't matter. The moment that countdown hit 0, the illusion would collapse in front of every investor watching. Ethan's voice filled the feed again. This system represents not just innovation, but legacy, our legacy. I almost laughed. The word legacy had lost all meaning. He wasn't building one, he was standing on mine. The camera panned briefly to the engineering team at the back of the room, faces I knew too well. Most of them looked drained, their smiles tight, performative, but one face caught me off guard. A young engineer, maybe 25, stood near the corner. He wasn't clapping. He wasn't pretending either. His eyes were fixed on the empty space where my workstation used to be the gap in the line of desks no one had dared fill yet. He looked at it for a long time, then lowered his head slightly, almost like a nod. That single gesture hit harder than any applause I'd ever received. I closed the live feed and stared at the dark screen. The clock in the corner read 11:40 a.m., 72 hours left. The city outside began to hum again, cars, voices, the background noise of a world moving forward without realizing it was already standing on borrowed time. I finished my coffee, now cold and dense with grounds. The aftertaste was sharp, but familiar. Control rarely tastes sweet, it tastes clean. Somewhere downtown, Ethan was shaking hands, believing every word he'd said, and somewhere in the lines of my code, time was quietly running out. 3 days left. Then silence. Rain fell the way regret does, soft at first, then steady enough to drown the silence. By the 5th night, the city outside my apartment was a mirror of itself, all light and reflection. The kind of scene you could mistake for beauty if you weren't the one sitting alone in it. The refrigerator hummed like a distant thought. The coffee on my desk had gone cold hours ago, and the blue glow of my laptop was the only thing keeping the darkness from closing in. The screen's reflection spilled across the surface of the table, mixing with the city lights that flickered through raindrops on the window. The system log was still open. Ghost Core pulsed faintly in standby mode, its code rhythmically cycling, almost like breathing. 3 days left on the countdown. I didn't need to check it, but I couldn't stop. Watching it was a strange comfort proof that something I'd built still obeyed me, even if no one else did. Outside, a siren wailed briefly, then faded into nothing. The rain filled the space it left behind. I stared at the lines of code scrolling by, and without warning, found myself remembering a different sound, Ethan's laugh. It had been years ago, back when he was just an intern with too much confidence and too little caution. He'd crashed one of our early test servers during a product demo for a defense client. I still remember the look on his face when the screen went black, the sheer panic. The way he'd looked to me like a child waiting to be rescued. The board had wanted to fire him that day, and I'd stood up for him, told them it was my oversight, that he deserved another chance. He'd thanked me after the meeting, said I'd saved his career. I hadn't realized at the time I was also saving my future executioner. The memory pulled at me, unwanted but persistent. For years I'd thought of him as arrogant, but I'd also seen flashes of someone human beneath it, a young man desperate to prove himself. I had believed that would make him kind someday. I'd been wrong. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, tracing the empty login field at the top of the screen. I wasn't logged into the corporate network anymore, but the back door still showed every access attempt, out of habit. I refreshed the log. The timestamp blinked into view. User login, 22, 41, 18, E, Vance, authorized by Turner F. My heart stopped. Ethan had just accessed the system using my old credentials. The protocol was simple. Any unauthorized use of the original architect's key would trigger the auto-erase sequence. It was meant to protect against theft, espionage, sabotage. I'd never expected it to protect me from him. The next line confirmed it. Auto-erase sequence initialized. Validation required in 72 hours. It was done. The system was now a ticking clock. I leaned back in my chair, hands trembling slightly. Not from fear, but from something heavier, resignation. Maybe, or sorrow. The kind that comes when justice feels too close to cruelty. The rain outside intensified, the sound merging with the hum of my computer fans until it became a single, endless drone. My reflection on the screen looked pale, older, for a moment. I barely recognized myself. I thought about shutting down the system, aborting the process, saving Ethan from what was coming. The logic in me knew he'd never understand the mercy. The part of me that remembered his laughter, the one I'd once defended, wanted to anyway. But the choice wasn't mine anymore. The protocol was self-contained. Once initiated, it couldn't be stopped without a full creator validation. And the creator me had already been erased from their records. A faint whisper escaped me, more breath than voice. You did this to yourself. No anger, just truth. I closed my eyes for a long moment, listening to the rain hit the window, each drop a reminder that silence doesn't always mean peace. When I opened them again, the log had refreshed automatically. The system's final line pulsed in soft amber core validation pending. 72 hours remaining. I stared until the letters blurred. Somewhere across the city, Ethan was probably celebrating his successful demo, completely unaware that the end had already begun and that he was the one who had pulled the trigger. The rain kept falling, tracing lines down the glass like quiet tears. I watched until I couldn't tell which side they were on. By the 6th morning, the city had no idea a billion-dollar system was quietly coming undone. The news still praised Vance Dynamics for leading the next generation of defense technology, but inside those mirrored walls, the illusion was cracking. It started with whispers on the company's internal channel minor delays, missing access keys, data that wouldn't sync. By mid-morning, those whispers had turned into alarm. Entire departments were calling emergency meetings. System anomalies were spreading across every region, and no one could explain why. From my apartment, I watched it all unfold on my private terminal. A dozen live reports streamed through my encrypted feed, each one sounding the same confusion dressed as professionalism. We're rerouting to backup servers. Validation scripts aren't responding. Engineering says the checksum keeps reverting. They were chasing ghosts. My coffee sat untouched on the table as I scrolled through each log. The system's heartbeat graph was flickering, slowing exactly as I'd predicted. There were no errors in the design, only consequences. At 10:40 a.m., a new subject line blinked at the top of my secure inbox internal memo. Emergency contract review. Sender Vance Dynamics legal team. I opened it carefully. The email wasn't meant for me. It had been auto-forwarded to Oralis Systems, my hidden company, through an old partner channel I'd established years earlier. The content was short, panicked, and red-flagged for urgency, immediate investigation into all licensing agreements involving prototype systems. Possible breach of IP chain. CEO requests report by 2 p.m. I leaned back, letting the words sink in. They'd finally noticed the missing signature, the legal gap that made their entire empire a house built on stolen ground. Every contract signed under Ethan's name would now be under review. 4 days ago, I'd felt satisfaction. Now, all I felt was a quiet, rising calm. There was no joy in watching people drown in the water they'd poured themselves, but there was justice in letting truth surface on its own. A second notification appeared. This one wasn't from the system, it was a personal email. Subject: thank you. From Leo Carter, Junior Engineer, Data Integrity Division. I hesitated, then clicked. Ms. Turner. I know I shouldn't be writing this, but I couldn't stay silent anymore. They told us to delete your code references from the archive. I didn't. I stayed because of your work, not because of them. I just wanted you to know that some of us still remember who built this. For a long moment, I didn't move. The cursor blinked, waiting for a reply I'd never send. Leo had been one of the youngest hires on my team. He'd stayed late more nights than he should have, asking questions about syntax and ethics, about how responsibility looked when the stakes were measured in billions. I'd told him once that real engineers build things that outlive their egos. Maybe he remembered. I let out a slow breath and found myself smiling small. Genuine. The kind that doesn't need witnesses. Back at Vance, the chaos deepened. Reports poured in, servers stalling, error loops expanding, projects grinding to a halt. Somewhere in the tower, Ethan would be shouting at the IT heads, demanding answers that didn't exist. He'd blame underperformance, power outages, bad luck, anything but his own ignorance. I didn't have to lift a finger. The system was doing exactly what it was built to do: respond to betrayal with silence. I opened the control terminal one last time. The screen glowed a faint amber, calm and methodical. Core status degrading. 24 hours remaining. The countdown was almost complete. Outside, the wind carried the faint sound of church bells from downtown. It felt poetic, an accidental requiem for a company that had once believed itself untouchable. I closed the laptop slowly, letting the reflection of my face fade with the screen's light. The calm inside me wasn't triumph. It was something gentler, like exhaling after holding your breath for too long. They were losing everything, and I wasn't angry anymore, just still. For the first time since that glass-walled meeting, the weight I'd carried finally lifted. Leo's words echoed in my head. I stayed because of your code, not because of them. I whispered into the quiet room, "That's enough." And it was. The lights inside the Vance Dynamics auditorium dimmed to a cinematic glow. Cameras rolled. Rows of investors filled the seats, their anticipation electric. A wall-sized screen pulsed behind the stage, displaying the Vance logo in gleaming silver. The caption below it read, "Global Launch. Project Ghost Core, the future of defense." Ethan Vance stepped onto the stage wearing that familiar, calculated smile, perfect suit, perfect confidence, the heir to an empire he didn't build. He raised a hand to quiet the applause. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice amplified across the hall. "What you're about to see represents not just technology, but legacy. A new era of intelligence born from collaboration, innovation, and vision." He paused, letting the words hang in the air like scripture. Behind him, the massive screen began its sequence codes scrolling in synchronized lines, graphs stabilizing, server lights blinking from green to white. Across the street, in a quiet corner cafe, I watched the same feed from my laptop. My reflection flickered in the glass as I leaned closer. The clock at the bottom of the screen read 11 hours, 45 minutes, 17 seconds. Core status validation pending, 43 seconds remaining. I took a slow sip of my coffee. It had gone cold, but I barely tasted it. The hum of conversation in the cafe was background noise, muted laughter, the hiss of an espresso machine, the kind of ordinary life that makes disaster feel almost holy. Ethan turned toward the display, gesturing to the shifting lines of data. "This," he said, "is human ingenuity at its finest." I whispered to no one, "Not human enough." At 11:46, the screen behind him froze. The audience murmured. Ethan's smile faltered. Only for a second. The data feed blinked, flickered, then bled into red. A single error code appeared. Center screen. Larger than life. Core validation, failed original creator not found. The words pulsed once, twice, then replicated across every monitor in the hall. Alarms didn't sound, just the deafening silence of disbelief. Cameras kept rolling. Investors craned their necks toward each other. One man in the front row laughed nervously. Another stood, demanding to know what was happening. Ethan's voice came through the microphone, cracked and uncertain. This is a temporary error, a visual glitch. We have backups." But there were no backups. The Ghost Core had no duplicates, no escape hatches, no safety net. Without creator validation, it was programmed to dissolve bit by bit until nothing but empty code remained. From my seat in the cafe, I watched the system logs on my screen sync perfectly with the chaos in real time. Auto erase in progress. Core sequence 47%, 68%, 91%. A few people in the audience began recording on their phones. Some laughed outright, disbelief turning to ridicule. The empire was collapsing, not with flames, but with quiet humiliation broadcast live to the world. I felt no thrill, no vengeance, just a strange kind of peace. This wasn't revenge, it was restoration. Justice without spectacle. Still, as Ethan's face filled the camera frame wide-eyed, pale, trapped in the echo of his own arrogance, I couldn't watch his fall for too long. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. The feed on my laptop had been streaming directly to Aurala Systems' private archive, capturing every frame for legal proof. I clicked end stream. The cafe's soft jazz returned to full volume. And for the first time that morning, I realized how loud it felt. I muted the video feed entirely. I didn't want to hear the laughter, the gasps, or the sound of his empire cracking under its own weight. I just wanted quiet. Outside the window, a light drizzle had begun, softening the world into watercolor shapes. People hurried past with umbrellas, unaware that, just a few feet away, the future had imploded. I closed the laptop, letting the reflection of my face disappear into black. The hum of the espresso machine filled the silence like a heartbeat restarting. My phone vibrated once a message from my secure server confirming Ghost Core sequence complete. All data expunged. I exhaled slowly. The tension that had been wound inside me for 7 days finally loosened. Across the street, the Vance Tower shimmered like nothing had happened. But I knew better. Empires don't fall with noise. They fall quietly exactly at 11:46. And when they do, sometimes peace sounds like silence. By 3 o'clock that afternoon, the rain had stopped, leaving the city washed clean but colorless. The world outside the windows of Oralis Systems was quiet, no billboards, no logos, no proof that anything important was happening here. The walls were white, the furniture minimal, and the air carried the faint scent of new paint and unsaid words. It was the kind of office that didn't ask for attention. It asked for focus. I sat at the long conference table with 2 representatives from Arcturon Technologies, their suits still damp from the storm. The contract between us stretched across the polished surface, 37 pages of legal precision. It wasn't my first time seeing it. I'd written half of it myself. Ms. Turner, said the older representative, his glasses catching the light. Once you sign, Arcturon will assume full deployment rights. The prototype transfer will be effective immediately. I nodded. My pen rested against the signature line. Steady, deliberate. On the document, the itemized line read, Acquisition of proprietary prototype project G-Core. Value $1.3 billion to anyone else. This was a sale? To me? It was reclamation. The younger representative shifted, clearly aware of the cameras recording from 2 corners of the room. We'll also need you to verify your position within Auralis for the official record, he added. His tone was polite but curious. They all wondered the same thing: who exactly owned the code that had just brought a global defense company to its knees. I looked up briefly, meeting the camera's red light head-on. Fiona Turner, I said softly, founder and chief executive officer of Oralis Systems. The silence that followed was almost reverent. The pen moved. The signature flowed cleanly across the paper. Fiona Turner, founder and CEO. The older man exhaled, as if releasing a weight he didn't realize he was carrying. Congratulations, he said. You've just made history. I smiled faintly. No, I corrected gently. I just corrected it. The pen clicked shut. The sound echoed lightly against the white walls. Final but not cold. For a moment, I let myself breathe. The past 7 days replayed in fragments: the boardroom, the dismissal, the rain, the silence. It had all led to this room, this table, this one quiet moment where the balance shifted back to where it belonged. The older representative began gathering his papers, but I stopped him. There's one more clause, I said. At the end, he frowned, flipping through the contract until he found the final page. A short paragraph sat alone beneath my signature, freshly added. Clause 14, philanthropic allocation. 10% of net profit derived from Project G-Core shall be allocated to scholarships for women engineers over the age of 40. He read it twice, then looked up at me, puzzled but impressed. That's unusual. It's overdue. I replied. No one argued. The clause stood untouched, a single sentence that turned a transaction into something almost sacred. The signing ended quietly. Hands were shaken, papers sealed, copies stored in sleek digital folders. When the camera stopped recording, the 2 representatives left with practiced smiles, unaware they had just witnessed the final act of a story that had begun long before they arrived. I remained seated for a while, watching the reflection of the city shimmer in the glass walls. The storm clouds were breaking apart, sunlight bleeding through in cautious beams, for the first time in years. I felt light, not victorious, not vengeful, just whole. This wasn't revenge. Revenge takes. This gave something back. It was rebirth disguised as business. I gathered my things, slipped the signed contract into my briefcase, and stood. The white walls caught my shadow as I walked toward the door. Faint but steady. Empires fall loudly. Renewal happens quietly. And today, it had my name written across the bottom of the page. Morning came soft and gold, the kind of light that forgives everything. My apartment was quiet, still carrying the faint scent of rain from the night before. On the desk, my laptop glowed weakly against the sunlight spilling through the blinds. The first headline on the newsfeed read like closure, written in plain text, Ethan Vance. Suspended pending investigation. CEO Harold Vance announces immediate retirement. It didn't feel triumphant, just inevitable. The empire had folded in on itself. Not through sabotage, but through truth finally catching up. I skimmed the articles, watching journalists dissect what they called the most catastrophic system failure in corporate history. None of them mentioned my name. I preferred it that way. An email notification blinked in the corner of the screen. Subject line Auralis Patent Renewal. Approved? I opened it, scanning the short confirmation before leaning back in my chair. The project that once defined my career and nearly destroyed it now belonged entirely to me again. No signatures to contest, no permissions to request, just my name, legally and quietly restored. On the far corner of the desk sat an envelope I hadn't opened yet. It had arrived that morning. Real paper, real ink, something rare in a world of encrypted messages. The handwriting was neat, old-fashioned. I recognized the name immediately, Walter Gray, one of the first investors I'd ever pitched to 18 years ago. Inside was a single note, for once. Justice didn't need noise, it just needed patience. I smiled, tracing the words with my thumb. Patience. That was what the world mistook for silence. The laptop's fan whirred softly as I closed the lid. The screen faded, and in its reflection, I caught my own face tired. Yes, but lighter. The kind of face that finally belonged to its own story. I walked to the window and pulled it open. The air was cool, the city below just beginning to stir. Sunlight brushed against my skin, warm and weightless. It's strange, I whispered, half to myself, half to the morning. I don't feel revenge. I feel peace. If this story spoke to you, if you've ever found strength in silence, leave a comment. Share your thoughts. And tap like, subscribe. And stay with us because sometimes, justice only needs silence to be heard.